Okay, this is a continuation. I believe this is part 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it's part 9 of the novel I wrote. It has a name, but I'm not giving the name right here. Yeah, okay. I'll continue here. Daniel Collin laughed and said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe the kind of critters I've collected off my radiator over the summer in my travels through Virginia and especially Florida. I'd peel off the biggest dragonflies and prettiest butterflies. I found them so cool and interesting that it seemed like a crime to just throw them away, as if it would be like, well, throwing away the art of God. So they're up there if you want to see them. It's up there that I used to keep my Pikachu doll. I bet you think I have that doll because I'm Japanese, true? Is that why?" asked Sally. Daniel smiled and said, "Yeah, actually, no. Hey, you brought up your pen you're worried about with that flash drive. Well, that Pikachu has a story behind it. It's a very special object, not because it's a Pikachu, but because of what it contains. It too contains a flash drive I sewed up inside." Sally smiled and said, "Sewed up inside a Pikachu? You sewed up inside Pikachu, you say?" "Yep, yeah." Sewed up inside Mr. or is it Mrs. Pikachu, him or herself? Who knows? Who knows what the heck Pikachu's gender is? I mean, I never really saw an episode of that anime series, just enough to know that Pokemon can only say their name and that some pink ball-shaped Pokemon called Jigglypuff puts you to sleep with its singing. Again, after I looked at what was on that flash drive, well, when I saw that Pikachu in one of those stuffed toy containers, you used to grab uh, stuffed toy animals. Oh, containers. You used to grab stuffed toy animals and whatnot with a crane scoop. I thought, hey, that would make a great container for my flash drive. I actually got lucky with the one try, snagging that Pikachu doll for me to later sew my flash drive into. So it looked kind of sad as she looked at the Pikachu doll. Daniel noticed and said, "I've never known anyone not to smile when holding a Pikachu doll. Pikachu usually cheers people up, not depresses them. The guy that had the flash drive before me had a fiance who loved Pikachu. As a matter of fact, after reading his journal, it inspired me to try to see if I could grab a Pikachu doll when I saw one. That one you're now holding." Sally then said, as memories came flooding back, "It's just that I too had a Pikachu doll. When I was a little girl, I saw the first Pokemon movie when I was 5, and I fell in love with Pikachu. A stupid cartoon creation, I know, but when I saw that movie, well, there was this scene in it where Pikachu's master dies and whatever, tries to revive him with lightning bolts to no avail. And oh, for a little girl, I cried like along with the hopeless, sad Pikachu. It still really makes me sad thinking about it, but hey, my dad got me a Pikachu doll, and well, it really was a very first toy. Actually, I actually loved, and it was so simple too. Really, said Daniel. Well, maybe I'll see that movie someday. Oh, I'm pretty sure you'd be bored being a grown up, said Sally. It's just had an effect on my 5-year-old psyche that I had a hard time forgetting, said Sally with watery eyes. Daniel thought and said, "Well, leave it up to my people to make a kiddie movie involving death that makes little girls cry." As Daniel drove the big rig through the snow, Sally looked at the Pikachu and said, "It must be a very valuable flash drive to go through the bother of sewing it up inside this." Daniel put the truck into higher gear, then said, "I'll say something that ended my science teaching career and got me into trucking." "What?" Sally asked with some surprise. "You're a science teacher?" High school science teacher. Yes, said Daniel. And now you're a trucker. Daniel smiled and said, being a trucker isn't so bad. You'd probably be a lot skinnier now if it wasn't for us truckers. Well, maybe not a lot skinnier, but because, hey, you're not fat. But it does kind of hurt to know that I'm doing something I spent about 4 years in college to not do. To not do. And yet you do it. Because something in that flash drive you say is in that Pikachu made you a trucker? So I looked at Daniel as if he might be a bit crazy after all. Daniel said with a serious look in his eyes, the Pikachu is rather new. The thing inside it is probably about 5 years old, and it changed my life. I wouldn't say it for the better either. It took me out of my comfort zone for sure. It rocked my godless world in more ways than you can imagine. Who knows? It might even end my life now, the way things are going. Sally smiled and said, you're being funny, aren't you? Daniel had the truck up in sixth gear. The truck was moving 30 miles through hour through the snow. I sure hope I don't have to put on chains. Daniel said, there certainly is a flash drive inside that doll, and it's probably far more valuable than your rant against your boyfriend. Why? Sully asked as she observed the Pikachu doll to see if she could find the stitch word. The stitch. If she could find the stitch. Find the stitch. Why? She asked as if she observed the Pikachu doll to see if she could find the stitch word that sealed up the flash drive. This find the stitches that sealed up the flash drive. Well, the USB drive, the USB flash drive containing 10 gig of data space, which was getting pretty close to being used up until I sewed it up inside the Pikachu. Um, Again, changed my life. If it weren't for that thing, you'd probably still be back in your car freezing now. Really? Again, what's it contain? Asked Ellie. Believe me, it's a long story, smiled Daniel. It's been through a lot, developing quite a past, and has gone through multiple owners. I'm just the latest one. I'm just the latest to own it. So I looked at Daniel, then looked at the Pikachu doll. Were they your friends who owned the flash drive inside this? Yeah. Were they your friends who owned the flash drive inside this? She asked. Daniel got the truck up into sixth gear, then said, believe it or not, I never met any of them, although I think the last one wrote me a couple of notes letting me know how his day went. I only kept the last note he wrote. But as I was saying, I never met any of them personally. As a matter of fact, before I obtained that flash drive, I think all owners who owned it, including the last guy, had been killed. Sally smiled and said, oh, come on. You're being funny, aren't you? Daniel then said, actually, not all had been killed. The second guy to have owned it killed himself. Killed himself? But why? Guilt, said Daniel. He did it out of guilt. Guilt? For what? Sally smiled. You think I'm making it up, don't you? Asked Daniel. Sally nodded. Suddenly Daniel felt the truck slide a bit. Oh, this isn't good, he said. Yeah, looks like I'm going to have to bring it to under 30. Well, if they fire me for being late, they fire me. They're hardly paying me for this slavery anyway. Man, said Sally, we are the only ones on this road. Anyway, I hope you're right, said Daniel, looking leery. Daniel downshifted to see if he could get more traction. Suddenly there was a beeping sound. What's that? Asked Sally. Daniel kept his eyes on the road as he picked up the old coffee-stained Qualcomm. He pressed a button on it and read the message. He then pressed another button on it and asked Sally, "Are you good at typing?" "I text," she said. Daniel then said, "Just type, 'I haven't been followed in the past hour.'" Sally got a puzzled look on her eyes and asked, you say you what did they say for you to respond with that?" They followed me if I they asked if I was still being followed." "Followed? Who was following you?" "Attackers," said Daniel. "You were attacked? But why?" asked Sally with concern in her eyes. Daniel looked at the flash drive containing Pikachu in Sally's hands and said, "That little thing inside the Pikachu you're holding in your hand." Sally's eyes widened. She said, "Are you some kind of secret agent or something? What's this thing contain?" "It's a long story," said Daniel. "But right now, just type, 'I haven't been followed in the past hour,' and it should relieve the fears of my company." When Sally typed out that sentence, she handed the Qualcomm to Daniel, who then sent the message off to his company. "Why were you attacked?" asked a now fearful looking Sally. Daniel eased the truck around the hill and said, "It all began when one of my fellow teachers in the teacher's room of my school talked about finding something in his computer. Something had been downloaded from one of the substitutes who used to work for my school district, but who hadn't been seen in about a year at that school. It was something he downloaded about 2 years earlier. What he